Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Senator Lankford for being with me today. We're here to introduce the Succeed Act. And the Succeed Act, I believe, is a fair, compassionate, merit-based solution to the challenge that we have with children who came here through no fault of their own and now find themselves uncertain about their future in this country. It resolves that uncertainty surrounding their legal status for children. This act is about the children. It's completely merit-based. If you work hard, if you follow the law, and you pay your taxes, you can stay here permanently. It ensures fairness. There's no skipping in line. We think it's very important that any person coming to this country that was already going through the process, that we not implement a policy that would actually allow that line to be skipped. But it also provides certainty, and it prevents chain migration for future illegal immigration. Here's just a brief statement on the eligibility requirements. The bill would cover most of the children who are available under DACA program. It covers undocumented minors, so that would be someone who came to this country under the age of 16, and it really tracks to the Daca administrative action. So that goes back to June 15th of 2012. That's the baseline that we've used, since that was a matter of the Daca administrative action under the Obama administration and continued for the next few months under the Trump administration. There will be certain requirements. They have to, anyone applying for protected status would have to undergo a criminal background check. That includes consultation with Interpol or country of origin, so that we can check the criminal past of the person applying for relief. They have to pay off any existing federal tax liabilities. They have to sign an acknowledgement that they will not be eligible for any immigration benefit if they are convicted of a crime while in the protected status. So in other words, the requirements for getting the protected status would continue to be held, and that could actually that would result in the protected status being declined at some point in the future. The CPR status has about 3 key pathways for being able to get protected status. One is maintain gainful employment. That's 48 out of 60 months. Earn a post-secondary or vocational degree, or serve honorably in the military. And the first CPR term is for 5 years. After 5 years, if they've met their merit-based obligations and they maintain a clean criminal record and they pay their taxes, they would become eligible for a second 5-year protected status. And once the participants have maintained CPR for over 10 years and have proven they are productive, law-abiding members of society, they would be eligible to apply for a green card, what's referred to as LPR, legal protected. And then after that 5-year period, the green card process, they could begin the process of naturalization. This bill, I believe, is a fair and orderly method for providing a permanent solution for the Daca children. It will not allow chain migration, and it has fairly high standards for people to be able to actually be eligible for the program. Rather than get into a lot of details, one thing I will leave you with that I think is very important is people ask, first off, we're setting fairly high standards to become eligible for the program. We think hundreds of thousands, maybe more than 1 million, could be eligible under this program. But we also have to take a look at the future problem. We've got to set a high bar and send a very clear message that people wanting to come to this country should consider doing it legally. And that includes people who come here on visas and overstay their visas. We've got to do everything that we can to prevent this from being another crisis that we have to deal with 10 to 15 years from now. We can get to some of the specifics of that when we get into the bill. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Senator Lankford. He and his staff have done a wonderful job working with my office and my staff and putting the bill together, and let you make some opening comments, and we'll answer any questions you may have on this subject.
Great. Thanks for being here and being a part of this conversation. This is a national dialogue that's happened for a very long time, and it's an unresolved issue that continues to get harder every single year as it's unresolved. Dealing with the Daca children have always been one of the most contentious areas. These are kids that literally do not have a home anywhere. They don't remember a home country that they came from originally, with their parents came here illegally, so they don't have a connection there. They're not really considered home here. So when we put the Succeed Act together, we took into consideration a basic fact. In American law, we don't hold children accountable for the actions of their parents. They're caught in between at this point. We don't want to promote illegal immigration. We don't want to say to adults, if you bring a child with you when you cross the border illegally, you get some sort of reward. But we do want to be able to speak out on how do we actually handle an unresolved issue in America right now. That is close to 1 million individuals that are here that have no place to call home, and that they consider the United States their home because they've grown up here, though they were brought here by the illegal actions of their parents. So now, what do we do with that? The Succeed solution is just that. It is a solution to try to be able to resolve this long-term issue that we have. DACA was a temporary statement. It didn't allow for any kind of permanency. In fact, it put many of those individuals in great turmoil and their family in great turmoil because it was a 2-year extension and then it could go away, and it gave no recognized status. It only gave this rolling recognition that every 2 years there may be something or may not be something. That has to go away. And when President Trump said it's 6 months from now that program ends, there needs to be a legislative solution, I wholeheartedly agreed. I made a public statement on that saying there needs to be a legislative solution to that. Days after that, President Trump called me late at night. We had a long conversation about how to resolve this legislatively. And during the course of that conversation, as we shared what Senator Tillis and I were working on at that point, and Senator Hatch is now fully on board and others, as I shared that concept with him, the President was fully engaged with that and was very supportive of the concept, saying that's the right way to go. But it also includes this caveat as well. We don't believe that this Succeed Act is a standalone bill, because there's so many issues when you deal with immigration. If you have a single standalone bill and leave other areas unresolved, you're not solving the greater issues of immigration. So what I would like to see, and what I heard clearly from the President, was we need to try to resolve the issues of immigration. We've had issues for 30 years that have been unresolved, and there's been no moment to be able to resolve those. This is the moment to be able to resolve things like border security, E-Verify. How do we handle our visa program? Do we have this 50,000 visa lottery program? So many unanswered questions or inappropriate or dated answers that are out there from decades ago that now need to be resolved. When we resolve this issue for DACA, we should resolve the larger issue of immigration as well. So this individual piece is not designed to be a standalone. It's designed to fit into other pieces. We're not stating what those pieces are. We're saying that there needs to be an alternative. One other issue that I would bring up. The DREAM Act has been floated around for a decade. Congress, in one way or another, has voted on it 3 times. Each time it has failed to pass. We don't believe the DREAM Act is a conservative solution to how to be able to resolve this, but we also don't want to leave this question unanswered. We don't feel it's right to be able to say not the DREAM Act, but not say what would work well. And so we hope to be able to engage with members of both Republican and Democrat, with students that are in the DACA program, which all of us have visited with before, with those families and individuals, and to say, how do we create a solution that will resolve this issue for those DACA kids, but then will also fix the long-term immigration questions that are coming as well. That's our goal, and that's what we're working to be able to resolve in the next few months.
I also want to welcome Senator Hatch. Many of you know that Senator Hatch was one of the first people to try and move forward with the DREAM Act many years ago. And I think he agrees with myself and Senator Lankford and other members that we want to come up with a solution to the problem. And we want to get a large coalition of people who are willing to not necessarily look to the far right and to the far left, who seem about as interested in keeping the problem going as solving it. And this man here is somebody that I think probably has more depth of knowledge and experience with it than anybody on Capitol Hill, and that's why we're so proud that he signed on as an original co-sponsor. Senator Hatch.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I'm tired of this problem. I think we have millions of brilliant young people who can add a great deal to our country. And we need a permanent solution to this problem and not just keep kicking it down the road. And I think we need a permanent solution to, since DACA was rescinded. Now, I committed to working quickly towards that permanent solution and that legislation to fix the problems that really exist in so much legal uncertainty. Frankly, these are young people who have a real ability to contribute to our society. In many cases, most cases, they're educated by us. In many cases, they don't even know the former lands from which their parents came. They only know the United States of America. And frankly, this is a whole group of people. The Dreamers, have been incredibly powerful in their presentations of why they need this help. And I think we should give them this help. As the author of the original DREAM Act, which was mentioned here, I wanted to develop a solution that would really recognize the positive contributions that the Dreamers can make in our society. I'm really, really proud of these two gentlemen and others who are joining with us. We're willing to stand up and say we've got to solve this problem. We can't just keep kicking it down the alley and hope that somebody else will come along and solve it. We need to solve it. We need to give these kids an opportunity. We need to make it clear that America is the open country in this world for these young people who have come here, got educated here, and in many cases have brought here by their parents without any knowledge of the prior land or were born here. We also need to focus on a bill that has a chance of passing. And that's why I think these two gentlemen behind me are right. This is a bill that literally could pass, could solve these problems, could end the screaming and shouting that we've seen in our country over some of these issues, and in the end, I think, provide a pathway for these really good people who deserve a pathway, and who need a pathway, and people who could help our country to do a better job than what we're doing today. So I'm happy to join with my two colleagues here and others in doing what we can to resolve these problems, and to do so in a way that gives these young people an opportunity to be U.S. citizens, to get in line, to be able to really find their way, and to be able to realize that this nation is a great nation, the greatest in the world, and that we have love for them, and that we're going to help them. It's just that simple. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hatch. Questions?
Senators, you say that this is different from the DREAM Act because it has more rigorous requirements. But what I see is that they would have to wait for 10 years for a green card. In what other ways do you see that this is tougher or more difficult?
Well, you go back to the conditions for getting the CPR to begin with. The first 5-year period requires gainful employment. It requires pursuing a degree. It requires service to our nation in the armed forces, and that condition is something that continues to be a requirement throughout the 10-year period. If those conditions are broken, then the person could potentially be subject to deportation. I don't know if James, you want to, or Senator Lankford or Senator Hatch, you want to add anything to it, but I think it's actually setting a timeline out there that's 15 years at the earliest to pursue naturalization. And unlike the DREAM Act, we're very clear on chain migration and not allowing someone who has these conditional protected status petitioning for any other family members, conveying to them some additional authority over the course of that period of time.
But they would be able to do that in 10 or 15 years.
When they become naturalized. Prior to that process, before they become a U.S. citizen, obviously once they become a U.S. citizen, they are guaranteed the same rights as anyone else after they become naturalized, if they choose to become naturalized.
On that chain migration issue, since green card holders under current law can petition some family members, like their spouse or whatnot, how do you kind of explain or rationalize taking that right away for the Dreamers who get green cards with this?
The rationalization is pretty straightforward. The people who are moving through the green card process are people who have gone through the process legally over a period of time. This is a special group of people that we want to provide a solution to, but not necessarily let them expedite the potential admission of other persons.
And these are people in a lot of cases who have been here for most of their life, probably more than 15 years in some cases. Why set up this timeline that seems pretty long for people that have already been here for most of their life?
Well, I think first and foremost, this goes to the prevention component. What we are trying to avoid is having this discussion again 12 years from now. And so if we don't set a higher bar, then you're putting children at risk who may come across this country illegally. I continue to go back to something that I think is very important when we get on the border security subject. 10,000 people lost their lives over 20 years crossing the border. Over 20 years crossing the border. And about 1,000 of them were children. And so we're trying to do everything that we can to say, think this through, come across the border legally, go through the process legally to get a green card, and then have all the rights and privileges that come with having done it legally from the beginning point.
And one thing I can add to that as well, you're still talking about individuals during that 15-year time period. They have access to work, they have access to school, they have access to travel. So they have those basic freedoms that are already built in place that those individuals that are on DACA do not have right now. And so one creates some sort of permanency, but put them in the line so they can go through the process.
I'll come back over here.
I'm just wondering, you said that the chain migration provisions makes this a more conservative bill than the DREAM Act. I'm wondering how you plan, or whether you think that this bill can get 8 Democratic votes, whether Democrats would sign on, and they've drawn a hard line on the DREAM Act, and what.
I think anybody has drawn a hard line on the certainty of these children. Here's the problem with the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act, with all due respect to the senior senator here, has failed every single time. So why are people drawing hard lines around something that doesn't look like it has the votes to get out of the Senate? If it did, probably not out of the House. So at some point, if people, and I take at face value the floor speeches where people have talked about this being about the children, providing them certainty, then I think they need to check some of their biases at the door against one bill or another and actually join a conversation that I think is going to provide these children with certainty. And I just don't see a path to success for the baseline DREAM Act. We're filing this bill. We're happy to work with anybody who would like to propose other provisions. But on the whole, I think that we have a bigger base to draw on in the Senate and a bigger base that's very, very important to draw on in the House to get this to the president's desk. Yes, ma'am.
What do you say to people, especially American voters, who see this as amnesty and are against it, but also people who say they're going to, these people, these dreamers are going to compete with people for jobs unless you're hurting Americans in their job market?
Well, on the amnesty question, people have accused me of being for amnesty for even before I was even in the Senate. And the reality is amnesty doesn't work. It failed famously back in 1986. This is a path that admittedly at some point allows someone to go through the naturalization process. But we think that it's a balanced resolution to a vexing problem that hasn't been solved for 30 years. And we'll have to take the hits. We'll take the hits on the far left for saying you're not getting them to citizenship soon enough, and you'll take it on the far right for saying you've ever given them an opportunity to pursue citizenship after they've done all that's required for them to continue to have the protected status that's in this bill.
Let me mention one thing on this. Well, I'm glad to be able to talk on both of those. The job issue is an interesting issue because those individuals are already in the job market. Many of these DACA students are actually DACA young adults. They already have access to the job market right now because they've been given deferred action. So they're in higher education, they're in the job market, they're currently a part of our economy currently. That continual competition in our economy doesn't hurt us, that continues to help us. It actually hurts us to be able to pull those individuals out of the economy. On the flip side of it, this is not an amnesty bill where we take those individuals and to say, we're going to give you a quick route to citizenship and just ignore the realities of what happened coming in. The balancing act that we really want to make here is we didn't want to ever be able to basically encourage future illegal activity and tell adults, bring children with you and you get special recognition and you get a special path in if you bring children with you when you commit an illegal act. I don't want to reward the adults for bringing a child with them when they did it. But I also want to recognize for those children, they were children, many of them 2 or 3 years old when they came. They've grown up in this country. They know no other place. So it is a reasonable option for us to be able to say, let's take those kids that had no other option. They came with adults. They brought them illegally. Put them in line, not force them to return back to home country, but put them in line here, the only country they've known, allow them to be in that line and to be able to get there. And almost identical length of time, if they'd have come from Mexico or Guatemala or Honduras and they started the line there, it would take 15 to 18 years if they started there. We're just allowing them to be able to start the line here on it. And an interesting thing on it, I've had quite a few folks in my state in Oklahoma that I've talked to of late that are very, very passionate, that are very conservative people. But on this issue, they see it how it really is. These are children that did not have a shot on it. And so we need to be able to make sure that we're actually speaking out on our compassion for individuals, upholding the rule of law where the rule of law is appropriate, and where we also are engaging with those children as well to say, how do we resolve this permanently?
And incidentally, on the economics question, on the economics questions, job impact, we'd be happy to share with you information that we have on that specifics.
These are young people who are in limbo. It's not fair to them. Many of them have proven themselves as decent, honorable people who would make great citizens in this country. We're providing a means whereby they can get there. They can get around what are today very difficult laws, and frankly, in the process, earn the right to citizenship. I think they'd jump at this opportunity, and I, for one, want to get this problem solved. We're letting a number of people in our society stay here in this country really illegally under current laws, which are stupid laws in some ways, and in a state of suspension that nobody should have to be in. Many of whom are educated by our universities and our schools, and who just need a chance. And this is a way to solve this problem, and I would hope that our friends on the Democrat side and even everybody on the Republican side will see this as something that would really be a critical answer to what really are some of the real problems surrounding immigration and surrounding these, especially these dreamer kids that literally just dream about being American citizens and want to be American citizens, would live like American citizens, would serve like American citizens, and of course would be, in the end, American citizens.
Senator Hatch, since you're chairing that health care hearing today,
Yeah.
It seems like these sweeteners for particular states haven't had much of an impact yet. So how do you view the bill's prospects at this point? And if it fails, then...
Go ahead.
Off subject. Next question. Yes.
Thank you, Senator. My question is for Senator Lankford. You said you spoke with President Trump about this. So would you say you have his support on this bill? And do you think we could get this in place by the time that the DACA runs out?
Yes, this could be in place by the time DACA expires, and the president says he's not going to renew it anymore at that moment. It could be in place, but it's not a standalone. We have to resolve the other aspects. We have to continue to be able to build a coalition around this and say this is a solution that we believe can actually pass and get into law. The president was very outspoken. When I walked him through the details of it, he said that's exactly the kind of solution that I think would work and would be a good option to be able to accomplish. So obviously, he's not seen the bill text, because when we talked about it 3 weeks ago, we were still finalizing a lot of the bill text. I was talking through the concepts of it, but wanted to let him know this is where we are and the direction that we want to go. But his statement was very clear as well. It's the same as mine. It's the same as Senator Tillis. This has to be a part of a larger package. It can't be a standalone.
Senator, thanks. Just a quick question about your colleagues on the House side. Last time Congress was dealing with immigration, it sort of was in their court. And have you had any conversations with anybody about possibly co-sponsoring the bill?
Well, we have, and I should have mentioned earlier that Congressman Corbello and I have been talking for probably about a year. They had the RAC Act, and that was instructive into some of the drafting of this bill. And I also think that the Speaker putting together the working group is also a very positive sign. That's another reason why we want to get this bill, this alternative, into the narrative, because we believe that it will receive support. The RAC Act had a fairly good base of Republican support and some Democrats interested on the House side. So we'll have to work on some of the additional provisions that we put in. But I think it's a good place to start that discussion with our colleagues on the other side. I'm going to do a windshield wiper here. Yes, ma'am.
Piggybacking off the last question that you asked, so what is the next step from here? Because a lot of times bills do get introduced and they just lie there. So have you spoken to the leadership here in the Senate? Have you spoken to Democrats here in the Senate at any point? What would be the next step?
I have spoken with members in the Democratic Conference, and I have spoken with members in leadership and a number of other members who are interested in the bill. So I think what's different about this bill, the president has made it very clear that President Obama's DACA, the administrative action, was an inappropriate way to deal with a problem that he wants solved. And so we have a clock ticking out there. And every day when these children that were covered under DACA wake up, I know they're worried about their certainty. And hopefully that pressure is going to pull forward this discussion and potentially get something that we can get to the House and ultimately to the President's desk.
Are you looking at any other particular bill, because you're saying it's not a standalone, it would have to be included in something?
Yeah, I think border. Yeah. I think border security, a bill that I'm an original co-sponsor of, that I think has some of what has to enter into the discussion on border security from Senator Cornyn, is an important place to start. There are other bills out there and other proposals. What we're trying to do is be open to all ideas. On the one hand, it has to be a part of a broader bill, but it also can't get so unwieldy that it becomes comprehensive immigration reform, because we know how that movie ends. What we need is something that is dealing with the Daca population, is dealing with border security and other elements that we think are important. And a lot of that is in consultation with Homeland Security and people in the administration.
Just following up on that really quick, do you have a commitment from Leader McConnell to either take it up on the floor, or a commitment from Chairman Grassley to take it to the committee?
We've had productive discussions with Senator Grassley. We're going to continue to have discussions about the path that it would take through committee or to the floor. But those are ongoing because there's a lot of other things that we've got to try and get done this year too. We've got the year-end budget decision. We've got a number of other bills that will consume a lot of chamber time. So trying to figure out those mechanics we'll work on as the bill moves forward.
Senator, you talk about addressing visa overstays, and that's one of the key things in your bill. Could you expand on how you plan to do that? The federal government always has a really hard time tracking those down anyway.
Well, first off, we've got to make it very clear that if someone, 30 to 40% of the illegally present population here came through visa overstay, not through a border crossing. So we're talking about provisions that will tighten up the visa program and not allow pursuit of any sort of citizenship for people who abuse the program or do not honor the spirit of it. And that's with travel visas, work visas, the full list. If you'd like some more specifics about the mechanics, we can cover that offline.
Last question. Senator Tillis,
Yeah.
Senator Lankford's office suggested one off-topic question, please, and it would be about the NFL and the president calling for a boycott of American companies. Could I have both your thoughts on that, please?
I'll take it if you want to take it as well. So yeah, I'm glad to. So yeah.
I was about to say off topic.
Yeah,
just
it is.
balance.
It is off topic, but let me say this. Obviously, individual Americans have the ability to be able to have free speech. Individuals can protest as they choose to, can have free speech as they choose to. Businesses can choose to be able to act and react on that. I do have an issue that I have to tell you. For whatever reason in America, if individual players kneel in protest at a football game, that's seen as free speech. We do have high school coaches that have kneeled in silent prayer and they've been fired. Now, the First Amendment's the First Amendment. It goes start to finish. We can't say to one football coach, you're fired if you kneel in silent prayer at the end of the game, but to a player, if you kneel in protest at a game, you're celebrated. We got to be able to determine where we are as Americans on that. If we're going to honor all free speech and all free exercise of religion, we need to be able to honor that universally.
I couldn't do any better than that. Yeah. So thank you all for. Well, Senator Hatch is gone. So thank you all for. I'm not on a committee of jurisdiction. They be happy to speak with you offline. But the people have accused me of a lot of things in my time as a leader, but being undisciplined is not one of them. I want to stay focused on providing a solution through the Succeed Act for these children. I want to make it very clear that we are willing to talk with anybody who is genuinely interested in providing certainty and a solution for these children. Let politics get checked at the door. Let's do something on a bipartisan basis, provide certainty to these children and young adults in this country, and I'm going to spend a lot of time remaining focused on that, and then we'll deal with these other issues out in the hallway. Thank you all for being here.